Hey guys, Ruggero here from One Foot in the Door, and this is my third video on rehearsals, on how to rehearse, how to prepare for a role. Okay, so if you haven't watched the first two, please go and check them out. Links down below. It is important because a lot of things I talk about today, I will refer to stuff in the previous videos. So we have done our analysis of the text. We have figured out what kind of function our character has within the story, and we got used to being the character by filling in the blanks in the information and by then improvising as the character. These are all steps that are, I think, very, very important to anything, to any kind of very engaging interpretation, let's say. These are things that some people like to do for auditions as well, although you don't, if it is just a short bit, it might be tricky. It might be tricky to do all of this for an audition, especially if you're working on your own, especially if you don't have that much time and stuff. So you can still do them. For auditions, what we do today is a lot more important. I would recommend, though, practicing the rest as well. And if you're a director, don't underestimate the importance of those first two steps. A lot of people, often for lack of time, a lot of people tend to just jump straight into the third thing, which we do today, which is the scene work, literally scene work, script work on the day of shooting, and go into the minutiae of how to make a scene click, how to make the script work, how to make it interesting. This is very often in itself enough, but if you want to really create an interesting character, then the first two steps are very, very important. Okay, so we've done all of this. Your actors are used to being in character. They played around with the characters. If you're an actor, you are used to being in character and you know everything about your character. Okay, so now is the time to work on the script, on the specific script, that scene by scene that we're going to be working on. Now I have my own very specific series of actions, series of exercises that I like to do here, and the first one is always a line run. A line run is just say the words, and I always tell my actors this: don't worry about interpretation, okay? Just say the words. Get used to saying the words out loud. Very often when you get to this point, the actors haven't actually had a chance to work together. They each learn the lines on their own, and maybe with someone else, but it's always different when you're there in the room with the other people you have to work with, and you just have to say all these things out loud, right? It's not the same thing. So lines will go out of the window. People will forget them. So it's very, very important that the director takes pressure off and you don't push the actors, hey, do it for real. No, it's the opposite. Pressure off, just do a line run. Relaxed. They will still interpret. Okay, actors always do. Okay, if you're an actor, try not to worry about interpretation now. Just say the words. It's very, very important, guys, if you're actors. It's very important that you don't learn the lines with an interpretation attached. What does that mean? It means what we call over-rehearsing in a way. It's just when you learn the lines and you say them always in the same way. So you pre-rehearse the scene, you prepare it at home, and you're so precise that every single time you use the exact same way of saying a specific line over and over and over again. That's a problem. That's a problem because if you do that, your brain connects the line, the words, with the emotions or with the way of saying it. That means that as soon as the director tells you to do something different emotionally, you forget the lines. So it's important that the lines are independent of anything else. For you, if you're a director, doing at least one line run, usually I do a couple, it's important because, first of all, it helps them get into the rhythm of this, getting used to saying these lines over and over and over. And also helps you see what their interpretation is, okay? Even though you tell them not to interpret it, they will interpret it because they're actors, that's what they do, and that's fine. So it helps you see. Right away, you can start spotting things. Oh, they always do say that line that way. Oh, they're interpreting this moment, this section in this way. Oh, I don't like it. Don't tell them just yet, okay? Don't tell them just yet, but just help them do this. Now, this also helps you because this is where you realize if they actually know their lines or not. Very often it happens that someone can't remember their lines, and that means you need to then spend sometimes up to an hour to help them remember their lines. And again, there's several exercises to do this. Just repetition is good. If they're really struggling, I like to have them repeat just one line three times in a row, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. It's important that you also make them connect their lines with the cues. So even if you do a simple section, always start from the cue, because they remember, okay, after this I need to say this section here. So once they are, once the lines are good, once they're solid enough, then you start to play. Now, depending on what the scene is, if the scene is intense, there's a very good exercise that I love doing, which is I ask them to get really close, not under COVID situation right now, but once this is all over, I ask them to get really close, literally touching forehead, so forehead to forehead, and I ask them to go as quiet as they can with their volume and say all the words, again, without worry about interpretation. This is just to create a feeling of intimacy, which is something which I talked about before is extremely important on camera, especially if the scene requires moments of truth, of honesty, of real connection, okay? It might not be the whole scene, but it's important that they say all the lines with this lower volume and create a bubble. It's as if they were in their own little bubble, okay? This helps them find the right dimension for the scene, unless it is something more comedic. If it is something more comedic, then it can be bigger, it can be louder. Obviously, be careful that they're not over projecting the voice, because it's not theater, it will come up as overacted if they do. But if they're good actors, they're used to working on camera, that shouldn't happen, okay? Now, even just at this point, if they got good instincts, if they're good actors, they're prepared, the scene might already be pretty solid. So what you start doing now is you work on specific moments. And in order to do this, you as a director or you as an actor, if you're preparing the scene, need to look at the whole script and figure out what is the arc of the scene. So what happens in the scene, okay? Every scene has something that happens, okay? Even scenes that look like they're just two people chatting or whatever, is never like that. If in a scene nothing happens, the scene will be cut from the script, if it's a good script. If it's a bad script, that's difficult. But that's the point. So what happens in this scene? And you can tell what happens by the characters' reactions, okay? There can be exceptions to this, of course. But in general, whenever something happens, and I'm not talking massively important things, okay? It can be tiny things. But your characters will still react to whatever's happening. So in general, especially for the lead characters, but also for the minor ones, you always have a first emotional state, then there's a gear change, something happens, and then a second emotional state. This is important. You need to know that there is this arc. You need to figure out why this arc happens and what is the main thing. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that happens. There can be many different other important moments, important gear changes in there. And in fact, you get to the point where each half a line has at least a beat or a tiny change. But you need to know, first of all, what is the main one for each character. Okay? And the main one has to hit in the right way. Okay? The main the impact of the main thing that happens has to be clear, has to be felt. Okay, again, depending on how important it is, depending on how impactful it is, but we need to see it. If your actors play the scene throughout in the exact same way, it feels like nothing's happening. One thing that we looked at in previous videos, I can link down below, is take your time. Make sure that if you're an actor, you take your time. If you're a director, make sure your actors take their time, especially in the main important moments, even if they are very emotional. Even if the main gear change of the scene is extremely impactful and strong, so the tendency would be to speed up and pick up the cues and go with the energy like you would on stage, doesn't quite work on camera. You need to actually slow down. Let us see, let us feel the reaction, okay? So in general, one thing I tell my actors, this especially once we get to the close-ups, but also in general, even at the right before we start shooting, is to take their time. Just listen to what the other person is saying and let that have a reaction, and let that reaction lead you to the next line. Obviously, you need to be careful, okay, because if you do too much, then the scene ends up dragging. As a director in general, the idea to direct a scene is like a symphony. It's like you're an orchestra director. It's much more about energy, rhythm. There are moments, sequences, so sections of the scene where you do want your actors to pick up their cues, to go faster and even louder, boom, and get, boom, and then you slow it down. It can be, moment of an argument. And then you have a whole section where you say, okay, guys, let the energy build until this line. And then this line is the highest point. It can even be shouted sometimes, or it can be, it's the most intense. And then take a long pause. And let's see what happens in that pause. And then something else, and then something else. It is all about variations. So your work as a director is to find all those little moments. First of all, the main gear change. But then, as I said, there will be lots of other ones, lots of other moments. Once you get into the right rhythm, literally every line or every half line, everything that happens needs to have a reaction. That's what you want. You want every moment to be different, to be diverse, to be interesting. Because that's what life is. In real life, we always react to everything, right? So we want to recreate that in an interesting way. The risk often is that actors skip over reactions. They just say the lines and then say the line again and then say the next line, and they're not really taking anything in. Of course, there are exceptions. There will be moments where you might tell an actor, do less or do nothing. But you need to know why you're saying that, and it needs to be precise in a specific moment. Don't take the do nothing as the main rule for everybody, because very often the do nothing leads to terrible, boring performances. So what you want is a performance that is extremely interesting, true, realistic, not overacted, but very diverse and interesting. Every line should sound completely different than the one that came before. Very often actors tend to get stuck in a certain way of saying the lines, a certain rhythm, a certain cadence, a certain intonation even. And that's a massive giveaway, that the fact that they're acting, and it becomes boring as a performance. So it's up to the director, or it's up to the actor. If you're an actor, you need to start listening to yourself, or maybe record yourself and then watch it back. Are you being boring? Are you being monotone? Are you using the same intonation for every single line you have to say? If so, change it, okay? Change it, experiment. One thing you can say is literally, how many ways can you say a single line? A good way to help actors break through a cycle, or if you're an actor, break yourself free, can be the repetition exercise, or a similar not exactly a repetition exercise, but in a similar one. So you have them repeat a single line over and over and over again with the other actor, but each time in a different way. Can be repeating on your own, just say blah blah blah, say over and over and over, or a little exchange. So 2 lines back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. As many different ways as possible, okay? Just to sort of break free, find different ways of doing this. Hopefully this will make them shift into a different gear almost. They will feel free to give a different type of performance, a more free and fun performance. And usually this then leads to much better things, much more fun things. So the general attitude I have is to take pressure off, let them experiment, let them be free, let them feel safe in experimenting, in doing things differently. But then at the same time, be very, very precise. So if you want them to really pause after a line, really take something in, then tell them, like, really slow it down, really take your time on this. Or the opposite, or really speed this up, guys. Like, we need more energy in this section. Bring it up, bring it up, bring it up. An exercise that can be good about that is you tell them to run the lines and really overlap, and you even click them in. You have the script and you follow, and every time someone needs to start talking, you click, and you make them overlap. This really brings about more energy, for example. So that's it. You work on the specifics of each little section of the scene until you have a clear journey through this scene, a journey that makes the scene interesting and that makes the performances really pop. And you do this right before the scene, right before you start shooting. Usually I want to get the actors to about 70%, and then you can still do bits of this as you go along, especially right before the close-ups. That can be good to really bring it home. So guys, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope this was useful. I hope this gave you some ideas. By the way, we talked about auditions. In auditions, this specific work is the most important thing. Very often you don't really have enough time even to actually do all the rest that we've done, and it doesn't really matter as long as you manage to really nail that little scene that you have to do for the casting. That's all you need very often. And actors who get good at this, they get cast over and over and over, and their audition tapes always stand out compared to people who don't quite manage and end up giving a bit of a flat and boring interpretation. So again, let me know what you think in the comments below. And guys, I got an interview coming up with Neil Bishop, who is a brilliant actor and my co-writer for #Honesty, and he's also playing Jack in #Honesty. So we're gonna have a little chat about this, about rehearsal, about the acting process, and about really specific and hopefully useful tips on how to prepare for roles, how to deal with the reality of being an actor, which is not a very glamorous job, guys, but if you love it, I think you'll find it very useful. So keep your eyes out for that. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.